Good morning, and we thank you so much for the comments that you're sending in. We're talking about the 2022 deputy presidential debate that is slated for later today at the Catholic University of East Africa. Just about 3 weeks to the general election. Let's talk about the track record of the candidates, and in particular, in the Daily Nation, Gachagua versus Karua head-to-head. We're looking at Martha Karua here, boasting reform credentials that include a record in the trenches along Raila Odinga during the multi-party campaign of the 1990s. Rigathi Gachagua, on the other hand, comes to the table with two major credits. That's what the Daily Nation is saying: his mobilization skills and his reputation for spending generously in the search for votes. So just looking at these two candidates, Irungu, and the fact that they're going to be going head to head. Let's look at their track record and your assessment of both candidates in terms of what they're bringing to the table, and in particular what they're bringing to their particular presidential candidates in terms of value add.
Yeah. So first of all, I think we have to broaden the conversation. Until August the 9th, there are 4 deputy presidential candidates. So I think we have to give space to Ruth Mushero and also to Justina Wabui to really just get a sense of what they could bring to this. I mean, I think for Ruth and Justina, they are business, they're basically business people, and they have been involved in a number of companies. They've managed businesses. I think Justina is particularly interesting in some ways because she has practical experience as a family of being a post-election violence survivor. And I think that's important, particularly given the violence that we see in our general elections. I think, you know, we've said besides the 1982 coup, general elections occasion the most violence on the population of Kenya. So therefore, you know, here's one candidate who has actually seen her family's livelihood destroyed as a result of elections. Coming to Rigathi and to Martha, I think there are a couple of things here. First of all, I think it is important to interrogate people's backgrounds. I think you cannot just go on the basis of how well they speak on a manifesto issue, how good the manifestos are. That's important, but I think how they articulate it is really critical. Because as we've said, deputy presidents have a responsibility. They're not essentially just the the assistants of a president. They will be given responsibilities. And some of that may be, for example, chairing the National Security Advisory Council. Right? These are big decisions that get taken there. They may be sent abroad to engage with other governments, and we need to know, what is the nature of the deputy president and their capacity to be able to manage. I think the last thing I wanted to say really is that they will be an important, support structure for the president in terms of their cabinet and in terms of how they engage the political formation, their political party. Now, we do know fairly likely that whoever wins the election at the presidential level may not necessarily have control or the majority seats in either the Senate or in the National Assembly, right? So there are going to be a lot of deals and a lot of agreements that will have to be raised inside of those two very important houses. And if you don't have a strong deputy president who can basically manage the politics while the president manages the country, my concern is that you're going to have a situation where you could find a strong executive, but basically no power in the legislature.
Kipchumba, as we look at these 4 deputies, let's zero in before we look at the others. Once again, on Gachagua and Karua, both are from Mount Kenya. And in terms of their ability to mobilize, we're seeing Gachagua coming out very strongly here in terms of the description in the dailies, in terms of his ability to mobilize. And then here we're also seeing Martha Karua, a veteran politician who, of course, has earned her stripes over the years, very much respected, and also looking at the gender card there, her being a woman, and what that brings to the table as well. Your views?
Lillian, I always run away from the gender card because in it we is a smokescreen. We refuse to delve into the heavy issues, and we come back to discussing the issue of gender because through the gender card so many other things run across the bridge without our knowledge. But coming back to the discussion of the two and their previous history in public service and whatever they have done, I think when it comes to what Rigathi Gachagua has done, it's in public domain. He's a serious grassroots mobilizer. He has a very good track record as being a civil servant, because he was at one point the PA of the outgoing president, and he has risen through the ranks. And all of us know to rise in public service, and even the old day public service, it takes a lot of tenacity for one to come to that level. But again, what we will expect going to forward is that Rigathi Gachagua will use the experience he got to make sure that the Kenya Kwanza administration has what we'll call political stability, to make sure that he can balance between making the politics of the day, getting them right, and helping the president of the moment to make sure that the administration is stable. And then also, coming from Mount Kenya, he represents a huge interest of the people who are the small-scale business people in this country, and he has spoken about it. When Gikomba fires have been there, Rigathi Gachagua has addressed it. When this thing of fake, I would not like counterfeit goods, and when they were being confiscated, he has talked about it. So he has a track record of speaking to the core support base of our supporters, which is the people on the lowest cadre of life, the small or the micro enterprise people. So at the end of the day, he comes with that as having stood as their crusader. He might not have been in the, what we call the liberation movement, but he has stood with the people when at the hour of the need. So what I would like also to appreciate about Martha Karua, whereas she's heavy with the reform credentials, and that counts for something. We've been here, we've been in this country, but the question we need to ask is, what is the question of the moment? The question of the moment is, this country needs economic liberation. Can she steer through the economic liberation? This country needs an answer to all the economic questions, because the sustainability of our businesses is no longer something we can discuss. Issues of loans and what have you, what are their thoughts? Because in their thoughts is what will influence the policy of the next administration. And most importantly, between the two. And then again, it is interesting that I think the 4 running mates, all of them come from the Gema region. It is quite interesting. It says how important Mount Kenya is to the politics of this nation.
In terms of numbers? Yeah, in terms of numbers, and even in terms of the stake they do as a state nation. Yeah. So, Kabala, 3 out of the 4 running mates are women. So just going back to the gender card and looking at the track record of each of these individuals, as we look towards this debate and what we're anticipating and expecting to hear come out strongly, particularly from these women, the women that will be articulating issues for their particular presidential candidates today. The fact that there's 3 out of the 4 running mates being female for you, what are the issues that you are expecting to hear tabled this afternoon?
You cannot just wish away the gender card like that, because this is a constitutional right. It is in our constitution, and it's so important that it was entrenched in our 2010 constitution. Going forward, I'd like to know more about Rigathi. I know that Honorable Karua is a reformist, and when she was in the water ministry, even up until today, early this year, she was awarded by water ministers an award for when she was, due to the reforms she did in 2003, 2005, when she was the water minister. The Water Act that came in, it was enacted in 2002 when Arap Ngenyi was the minister, but it wasn't operationalized. So the purpose of it was to devolve services in the water ministry so that you can increase access to potable water to the citizens and also reduce wastage and cost. Because you remember those times people used to bypass the meter, and when there was a water burst, they didn't have the manpower to come and deal with it. So it took some time. So a lot of water was wasted. She came in, she reformed, she ended up creating 12 water institutions, and 8 regional bodies, and one of the most important one of the institutions is a water sector trust fund, which deals with capital projects in water. And one of the projects that the Jubilee government was supposed to even make it happen through the fund is the Kimwarere and Rol projects such as damming. So as a reformist, she has her own credentials. As a member of parliament in '95, she was awarded by FIDA for championing the rights of women. In '99, she was awarded by the Kenya chapter of ICJ, that is the International Criminal Justice, as one of the best. And in the same month, again, LSK gave a performance of due diligence, best performance due diligence. So she has a track record where you see professionals in her body, where she's been identifying with her and settling on, and just recognizing that she is someone who has...
Yes, but in terms of mobilization, is she able to draw the numbers that her counterpart here, Rigathi Gachagua, promises to deliver in terms of his mobilization skills and in terms of his influence as well in the Mount Kenya region?
If you read over there, it's mobilization skill and reputation for spending generously. Now, we know what that means. So I don't think he's a good mobilizer. Maybe it's because of the second part of the statement. But with Karua, I know she's able. If you see the difference, the disparities between the polls before she was named as a running mate and after, you see the difference, the increase in percentage for Azimio team in the region. So that tells you a lot about her mobilization skills and her mobilization capabilities. So I believe... Your
thoughts, Irungu, around the politics of numbers?
Yeah, so I think there's two things. I don't want us to lose the conversation on gender, because I think, particularly given we're a manel, you not included. But I think the first thing is that the TIFA study in June, and I was just kind of looking up at it. It was quite interesting in a number of ways on this issue. First of all, 75% of the population that was surveyed felt that a running mate is important to the country. So Kenyans are interested not just in the presidential candidates, but they're interested in the running mates.
Running mates, yeah.
The second level of the analysis was 90% of the Azimio base were happy with Martha Karua as the running mate, whereas 67% of the Kenya Kwanza voter base were very satisfied with Gachagua, right? So I think the first thing that Gachagua has, if these statistics, and I know people are bouncing which polls they like and which ones they don't, so I know that there's a bit of a debate on that one. But I think the key thing there is really, there is a difference in terms of the voter, I guess the constituencies of these two political parties in terms of the deputy presidential running mates. Let me come back, if I can, Lillian, just to talk about gender. I think it would be extremely dangerous to dismiss gender as a light issue, right? And let me just talk you through it a little bit. So in April, it was very clear that two women to every one man were undecided in terms of who they were going to vote for, right? So first of all, just as a political campaigner, as a political strategist, to ignore the women as voters is very dangerous, right? Particularly as this election is looking like it's going to be quite close. But then there are other issues. I think there is issues about the political underrepresentation of women. We are still below the African standard in terms of how many women are represented both in cabinet or in the National Assembly or in other arms of government. Women receive salaries that are less by 23% that of men, right? So we have an economic disempowerment taking place. 62%, women are 62% more discriminated against than men, right? And then the last one, I think, that is so graphic for me, and I just have not heard the politicians address this in a way, including the Nairobi gubernatorial debate, was this statistic we had last week, which was that 500 women were raped in the course of 2021, right? That's 15 women a day. Now, my question is, those cannot be light matters, right? They have to be issues that are dealt with, not just at the level of the women candidates, and this is where I agree with Kipchumba. But I think the challenge to Gachagua this evening will be for him to demonstrate a gender-sensitive, gender-responsive strategy that Kenya Kwanza has to deal with these issues. And if he does it, he can debate, I think, powerfully with his main opponent, and that's Martha Karua. If we continue at the rate that we are going, it will be 2069 before we have gender parity in this country. Those are not light matters. Those are issues of policy, they're issues of power, and they're issues of representation. So I really encourage those people who are prepping the deputy presidential candidates, whether they're male or female, to actually take some time out to just generate their understanding and their strategy for dealing with these issues.
Yeah, and let's, before we move to Kipchumba and his response to that, let's go into the politics of numbers and in terms of mobilization for Gachagua and Martha Karua's, illustrious career in politics, and the politics of numbers, and how you see this playing out between these two candidates in today's debate and what they promise to deliver. Yeah.
And again, I have to go back to the opinion polls because, until we have anything more superior to that, we have our opinions. I have mine. As Amnesty International, we are completely non-partisan on this issue.
But numbers
so unlike
don't lie.
My two colleagues here, I have to, I really have to go back to the opinion polls. What we know is from the opinion polls, the most recent one, I think the InfoTrack one, is that there is probably about a 3 to 4% difference between the the big presidential candidates at this point. Yeah. We also know that Wajakoya has about 4%. Now that is a determining percentage if we follow the polls. Now the challenge of the polls is that the people surveyed are not necessarily voters. Right? So you can't translate a poll to a poll of a voter constituency, right? So that's the first thing. So there's an element of error, and I think 3 to 4% does not give us clarity at this point. Who are, we know who's the front runner according to the polls, but the margin of error is sufficiently close to ensure that actually we have a bit of, I guess what you call a neck for neck, a neck by neck, a running neck campaign. So I think that's the first thing. What are the electorates saying? 73% of the electorate are saying that the country is heading in the wrong direction. Only 11% are saying we're going in the right direction. The 11% are essentially basing their argument on the fact that there is peace in the country and that there is a devolved structure. For the people who are worried about the wrong direction, that we're going in the wrong direction, they're essentially worried about three things. They're worried about the high cost of living, they're worried about jobs, and slightly lower to that, misgovernance. The argument by politicians that Ukraine is the source of all our problems is not borne out by Kenyans. So I think as we think about mobilization and numbers, as we go into the deputy presidential debates and into the presidential debates, we have to declare that it is on these issues that this election will be won. It's not on the issues of, and this is where I agree with Kipchumba, it's not on the issues of personalities, right? They will be a factor. And we've seen how with a case like Wajakoya, his personality has swayed, a number of voters in ways in which, some of the older, more seasoned politicians have not been able to do that. But I think the key issue here is the winning formula for this election has to be on the basis of issues. I mean, last week, we presented a scorecard on the Jubilee administration, and essentially we looked at 23 human rights and scored the government. And what we found was that the government scored about 46% against, the constitutional freedoms and rights that are contained. And it includes things like food security. It includes things like health and the right to life. And I think these are the issues that we want to hear the Deputy President speak about this evening. Right.
And Kipchumba, you seemed to downplay the importance of the gender card in this election. In terms of your formation, how are you going to handle the gender issue? Do you have representation? And your thoughts around issues that Irungu has raised here this morning around underrepresentation, around the fact that even the IEBC itself threw out nomination lists because there was not sufficient representation in terms of gender, and the fact that there was a clear bias as regards female representation in most of these party lists.
Lillian, at a personal level, I have an issue with politicization of gender. What I support is giving policy measures that deal with gender. And that is why the formation which I support, we have come out with a whole dichotomy on how we'll handle the gender issue. First of all, we have said it is not about an individual woman. It is about the whole women of the Republic. And how do we achieve that? where the table where decisions will be made is at the cabinet level. We will have half of them there, so that all the decisions being made by government, we don't have to go to 2069 as Houghton is talking about. All the decision coming out of cabinet will be gender sensitive, because half of that cabinet will be female. Number two is, we've said it is also not about saying we have 3 or 4 chairmen of boards being women. Make sure that the CEOs are also gender reflective. So at the end of the day, that's why we are saying we don't want to bring the gender issue to be a political issue. Just because Rigathi Gachagua is not a woman doesn't mean Kenya Kwanza do not value the issue of women. And we are saying, you are either a son of a mother or an husband of a wife at the end of the day, and a father of a daughter. So at the end of the day, we are looking at it from the bigger picture point of view, where we are saying it is not about an individual woman, it is about the more than 25 million women in this country. And that's why we even went further and said the austerity measures we are giving to women which were not available before. And we are saying all this is to make sure that the woman in the society has the same competition level with a man. When we were working on the Kenya Kwanza charters, we realized that 3/4 of our title deeds in this country are held by men. It is also something that hinders economic empowerment of women, because if you have a title deed to land, you can access loans. And that's why, what was our answer? We said we will develop the Hustlers Fund, and half of it is ring-fenced for women. Because we realize and we understand the position where women are coming from. At the end of the day, the position of the Deputy President is one position, Lillian. But if we form government and we have that half being women, it will go a long way in even telling our young daughters that one day, one time, they can be ministers. They can also have the platform to rise to be presidents. So it is not targeting that one woman. And the next question that we need also to answer is the issue of numbers. And the issue of, whereas I do not agree or dispute the figures Houghton is reading, because for me, from where I sit as a strategist, you ask the first question, who funded the poll? That is where the whole thing lies. Number two, and the question which also ought to be answered, is the question that, whereas we might sit in Nairobi and talk so much about the gender card, it really influences, it has a very minute influence on the rural folk. And that is where 80–90% of our voting base is in this country. Right. When you sit as a strategist, it is a good thing. It looks good to say we have a woman running mate. But what about the details beneath there being a woman running mate? And also, I would like to answer to something which my brother talked about. He seemed to insinuate that by saying Gachagua is generous, it means he gives handouts. I want to remind him that Azimio has given the biggest handout in this country. Giving each Kenyan 6,000 for not doing anything is the biggest handout we have ever seen. So I think he needs to reconsider what he calls handouts or what he insinuates as handouts. And then the debate about the whole debate today, I hope and I pray that whoever will moderate the debate will not allow the 1 minute and 30 seconds kind of response, because in that 1 minute 30 seconds we cannot get a proper response. If we go the American way, the 3-minute way, we might make a lot of
Unfortunately, I believe rules and regulations have already been set, and therefore we're going to have to adhere to that. Kabala, let me get your reactions before we get tweets, after which we'll be asking our panelists to respond to your questions and your comments.
First and foremost, I think what he's saying would have been on the papers, because this is what I'm reading on the papers. So I haven't seen where Azimio has given people 6,000. Two, then they need to walk the talk and talk the walk. Is it walk the walk? Because they're saying that we'll consider women when we get into parliament. So basically, as we stand, the presidency has no representation of women. Now, what is politics? Politics is who gets what, when, where, and how. Look at it this way. When Honorable Karua was one of the 3 women in parliament, she challenged the standing orders then, where they were being told that women cannot enter with handbags in parliament. So if you enter with handbags, you have to leave them outside. She challenged the standing orders and say that, you know what, then if we can't enter with them, then also let the men leave their wallets outside. And this is not just a challenge in the public sector. If you know of Sheryl Sandberg, when she was at Google, she missed a meeting because, the author of Lean In, she missed a meeting because she was pregnant, looking for a parking close to the building, but there was none. So she had to park far away from the building and walk in. So she came in late. Just by the mere fact that she was in the decision-making table, she was able to influence the change of parking from where it was to closer. So my point is this: if you're not considering the gender and putting them in the decision-making table initially, as you said, and as you plan to set your government, start your government, how then do you expect us to trust you and entrust you with this, that you will come and consider our interests as the female of the nation?
Many thanks for that. Hold that thought, Kipchumba. Let's get your tweets. I'll give you time to respond to that. Let's get your tweets. Let's see what you're saying. Remember, the hashtag is Daybreak at Citizen TV Kenya. SMS feedback number is 22422. Let's take your tweets. Okay, there we go. Bob Otieno, you're saying today's Running Mate debate or even the upcoming presidential debate will be about personal-centered, but not issues ailing Kenyans, trying to outshine each other for votes. G. Gokui, you're saying the subsidy is timely and convenient. Kenyans shall be harvesting corn in August, will not be importing dry maize. Kabala, Kile, you're saying on the DP debate, the platform remains an important one, especially given that it's an opportunity for the candidates to persuade the 25% undecided voters. Martha Karua has the weighty experience needed for substantive experience. We in the rural areas don't buy packaged maize flour. Rather, we buy the maize which is selling at 200 to 220 per tin, gorogoro. Is the government also going to subsidize the price of the gorogoro? National debate is where candidates will get good chances to answer questions and clear their names against several issues. All candidates should attend unless someone isn't sure with his choice of, I think, presidential candidate. Yeah, okay. J.M. Musoma, you're saying the deputy president debate is likely to expose them because they were hurriedly picked barely 4 months to elections. They might contradict positions held by their presidential candidates. Will Karua speak in support of the BBI she killed? Is Rigathi privy to the bottom up? I think it's important to interrogate people on their background. You cannot just go on the basis on how well they speak or how well they articulate a manifesto issue. So Oliver Kipchumba wants to tell us that Martha Karua has not done anything apart from constitutional reforms. According to him, only Rigathi has worked and takes all the credit. Sad line of thought to hear him discredit a gender card as a non-entity. I think I'll start with you, Kipchumba. The gender card that you're seemingly dismissing is rubbing people the wrong way. Your response to that tweet?
Actually, Lillian, I think I've corrected my take on the gender card. I have no issue with the gender card. I have an issue with politicization of the same. Because, remember, anything that has been politicized in this country has not been resolved. I want us, because I told you, any man is a son of a woman, a husband of a wife, and a father of a daughter. At the end of the day, we need policy interventions, and we need to just comply with the Constitution on the issue of gender. But I would like to remind my friend that when you look at the two formations, it is Kenya Kwanza and UDA, to be specific, that has given 5 women an opportunity to run who have the real chances of winning gubernatorial seats. That is when we talk about dealing with the woman issue. Well, look at what Azimio is talking about. Even though the two women, it was Wavinya Ndeti and Charity Ngilu. Charity Ngilu was sadly removed from the position she was because I don't know what, instead of helping her strengthen her position. So at the end of the day, it is much about what you do away from just one position. This tokenism, Lillian, has to end. We need to make sure that we are doing interventions that even somebody who's not in politics in the village can feel those interventions. It is not about the elites. Our response to the gender issue is a cut-across issue whereby you are dealing with more than 25 million Kenyan women as opposed to the elite in Nairobi. We can sit here and talk about how one woman has won, what do we call these, feeder and all these other elite programs. But as that translated to the women in the village, that is where my issue is, because I come from a village in Tuyo Bay, and anytime we talk about women, I look at the women in my village, not the ones I met in Nairobi, because by the time they are here, they are empowered enough.
And such reforms, Karua's reforms,
right,
have made UDA get 5 women candidates.
And talking about the elite, let's go to the Gorogoro issue and the maize subsidy. A tweet there saying that the maize flour subsidy will only benefit, rather will not be felt by the people on the ground. Those people in Mashinani who say that for them, this does not really benefit them much because they stopped buying packeted unga ages ago. Irungu, I want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, on the Gorogoro question, and even on the issue of food relief. I mean, these are real issues that are affecting people in different spaces. I think what Kenyans have to be careful about is not to allow themselves to be traded off against each other, right? So urban Kenyans' interests are not, who are basically finding the cost of living too high, should not really be used as a way of trading against the people in Marsabit and in northern Kenya that are essentially livestock producing. I think Kenya has to work for all Kenyans. And this is the basis upon, universal human rights, is that every human being has the right to food security. I think there are 2 things that we suggested that the incoming administration needs to focus on. The first is that, whichever administration comes in, they need to audit, the current food security policy, because it is not working. It's not just that 4.2 million Kenyans are starving. It is that 28 million Kenyans do not receive their basic rights in the country. So that's a real problem to solve for the incoming administration, regardless of which policy manifesto is there. The second one is really around, how do we respond to climate change, right? This is the fourth rain. The rains have failed 4 times in the last 4 years. It's, depending on who you talk to, it's like the worst drought we've had in 50 years, right? These are real big issues, and we need to ask our incoming administration how they're going to tackle these in very practical terms. Obviously, the way to do it is climate smart and small-scale agricultural investment. That's where we need to go. And then the second part of this really is to look at the inefficiency of the food distribution systems. It's not that there is no food in this country. There is food in this country. The problem is that for the people who need it, they can't afford it, or they can't access it. So therefore, we need to look at issues like food wastage, and depending on which commodity, you could have up to 30%, 40% food being wasted in this country simply because there is no transportation and distribution mechanisms to get it to the parts of the country that need it. So I think these, with, I guess, storage facilities, that's the third part of this. These are the areas where we really need to see people looking as policymakers and involving society in this, because I think it's not just a matter of, a few policymakers sitting down and thinking this through. I think what we need to see is a very vigorous post-election debate with all our experts, all our associations, all the farmers' associations. So bring a whole of society approach to how we're going to solve this problem.
And Kipchumba, and to you, Kabale, as well, I think the issue that tweet was raising was the fact that for the Kenyan at grassroots level, these are temporary relief measures. The fact is they have not been buying packeted maize flour for a while now. It's too expensive and they had to resort to the goro, and that for them has worked. So in terms of food relief and in terms of the high cost of living as well, we're looking at high fuel prices as well. In terms of measures that the incoming administration should take to relieve Kenyans of the cost of living in this country, what would be your thoughts around the direction that should be taken?
Lillian, at the end of the day, we have to look at the food issue from a perspective that takes into consideration the whole country. You can't put that into urban people, the ones in the rural folk. At the end of the day, what you need to do is we go back to our agriculture strategies. We know that at the moment, any Kenyan spends 55% of their dispensable income on food. That means that, one, we have nothing to save. Because if you spend 55 on food, what do you do on rent and paying fees and other things? But what we need to do going forward is we need to go back to the basics. Go back to smallholder farmers, invest on them. Go back to making sure that all the agricultural viable land that is being held by government, lease it out to people who are willing to invest on it, because we are now nearly becoming a net importer of food. We import onions, we import garlic, we import nearly everything. That is not sustainable for the villager in Marsabit, for the villager in somewhere in Busia, because at the end of the day, we do not have an economy that can sustain the poor people within us. So what we need to do, and what the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto has put forward as a footprint for the nation, is invest in agriculture, make sure that we are producing food that we can sustain ourselves, so that on a bare minimum, you have something in your stomach before we even talk about anything. But the danger of this tokenism politics, whereby I come 3 weeks to the election, I say, what do you need? Take hunger. The problem is, even if you are to give us relief food today here, seated in this station, and say we are sending it to Turkana, when will it get to Turkana, Lillian? And the bureaucracies in government, all other things. Secondly, is the other issue. Outside that, there will be the issue of hoarding. On around 8th or 7th of next month, very shrewd business people will start hoarding this commodity. But if we were to make our agriculture work, you cannot hoard. It will be market forces. Market forces will determine how the prices of food. But if we allow just 4 or 5 millers to be the one determining the food destiny of the nation, we will not be in a good place. Second, my final point on the same will be this, is that the person raising the issue on Gorogoro is raising a pertinent issue, because millers will not sell maize in Gorogoro to people. That is the other point. Number two, millers will sell their stock to supermarkets and maybe stores. Most of our, actually 80% again of our folks do not consume sifted maize. We consume the one we take to a kishiagi somewhere, and that is what we make a meal from. So at the end of the day, we really need to ask that, whereas this intervention is important for Kenyans, it is not helping the entire population.
Kabala, Kipchumba is talking about tokenism and basically just looking at issues around hoarding. But away from hoarding, how then to control the rush to buy, because this is 4 weeks. We're looking at the maize subsidy that will last 4 weeks. And for the retailers as well, those who had already invested and bought stock at the current market value, how then to make up for that lost money?
How I see it, this is, yes, maybe you could say it's a stopgap measure, but it's one of many steps that are going to come. And what the government needs to do, and that shall be done with Azimio, is intergovernmental cooperation. Look at, for example, Siaya. The other day they bought 15 tractors that, again, they were never used in 2016. So these are some of the pilferage that is happening in terms of trying to fight hunger in Kenya. So how we view it is that this should be an intergovernmental cooperation where transparency, good governance, and austerity measures shall come to play to make sure that the agricultural sector is well funded and projects in the agricultural sector are authorized through the right ways and means, so to make sure that this is not something that is going to happen again in the future. And also we've said that we have a lot of arable land, government land, that is lying idle. This is one of the things that will also come in terms of trying to alleviate the issue of hunger. And I believe it's something that's possible through cooperation.
And another viewer here talking about personal-centered conversations. He's anticipating that this is what will be happening in tonight's deputy presidential debate. And yet both Kenya Kwanza and Azimio have launched very spirited campaigns against corruption. They're promising economic revolution for the vulnerable Kenyan, but concerns here from viewers that what played itself out at the Nairobi governors' debate, Irungu, is likely to pay, where they felt that a lot of attention was put, or rather a lot of attention was on these personalities. You did this, you did not do this, I'm better at this, you did not deliver this, I can deliver this, I understand Nairobi better. In terms of tonight's debate, looking at the core issues and the critical issues that Kenyans really need addressed, and their concerns around this being a personality contest. Your thoughts, Irungu?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think, it's television, right? So it's going to be two things. It's going to be personality and it's going to be policies. I don't think we can avoid that. I think the moderators need to keep the conversation focused on the issues that Kenyans are really concerned about. But I think, there will have to be a conversation around the track record of the people that are coming, because you don't elect somebody in the absence of their personality, in the absence of their career, in the absence of their track record. And I think that's what the moderators need to bring out for the public, right? So that people can actually get a sense of, like, does this person have the political and policy temperament that Kenyans need right now? Is this person a servant leader, or are they so egotistical that as soon as they get the trappings of power, they will hide behind 20 bodyguards, 6 SUVs, and be unreachable? Will their telephone numbers still be working after August I guess 3 days afterwards, August the 13th? Are they going to be approachable? Are they people who listen to people? These are the things that are really important in terms of political leadership, and I don't think we should step over them. I think it's really important to make sure that that's clear. I think the dialogues or the debates are essentially 3 things in any moment. The first is that they are an opportunity for candidates to hunt for votes. And let's be clear about it. They are there to sell their agenda, to sell themselves, and to win an election. It's not a reality show. It is a different type of thing. The second one is it's a civic education moment. It's an opportunity for Kenyans to understand the complexities of statecraft, how you trade off, for example, gorogoro, food relief, and packeted unga. Right? How do you manage that? Who matters? Is it the urban 28% of the population that are urbanized and living in cities? Is it the 4.2 million people who are starving in the northern part of the country? Or is it the rural masses? Right? Who matters to these politicians? And I think that's critical. And the last thing that it is a job interview. Let's be clear that these people are tarmacking, they are looking for our votes, and we are employers looking for people to employ. Let them come before us, let them declare what their vision is for us, and let us pick wisely so that over the next 5 years, we are not disappointed and worrying about those 5 minutes we spent in the booth where we took a decision rashly, and that we handed over state power and a multi-trillion economy to people who actually have no business running kiosks, but we have given them the keys to the kingdom.
Right, and Kipchumba, concerns over these deputy presidential candidates contradicting their bosses. A tweet there about Martha Karua and the BBI, and concerns around the fact that they may not be reading from the same script, because as of now they don't know what the moderators will be asking them and what questions will be forwarded to them.
I think also, Lillian, let's be fair and human to these running mates, be it Martha Karua, be it Justina, be it the one for Agano Party, or even Rigathi Gachagua. For the two, Martha Karua and Rigathi Gachagua, they are staunch politicians on their own right. They might have had public utterances or they hold different views on issues. I think from where I sit is that they are allowed that small or the slight error to have a different view on something. It enriches even the whole discussion instead of coming there and sounding like a broken record. But again, what I would really like to hear is not just their take on or the take of Martha Karua on BBI or something. I would like to hear both of them committing that they will implement the Constitution of Kenya. And the other point that we need to ask ourselves is this, that whereas their personality will take a part of the debate, let their personality, as we discuss their personality, let us discuss it through as a window which we look at their lives and how we look at their public life, as opposed to making it look like a show whereby we are discussing them as a full package. No, we want to discuss their lives in the only portion of their life that they have touched the public and how they will do that going to the future. I would really like to know or hear from Martha Karua talking about corruption and how she interludes that with the issue of KEMSA, Pandora Papers, and all these other issues that have been happening recently. I would like also to listen to Rigathi Gachagua talk about implementing the guaranteed minimum returns to even people who have livestock. You get my point? So that it is not about only people who do crops, because if you go to the northern part of the country, people do ngamia and cattle. So how do we make sure that guaranteed minimum returns are straight to those people, so that at the end of the day, we have interventions that touch on each and every Kenyan? So that is how I would like to look at it.
Kabale, before we take the tweets, the misses and hits in terms of the choice of deputy president, when you compare the Jubilee fallout, the president and his deputy president ought to have brought harmony to the country, but for the longest time, they seem to have not been in good relations. So in terms of the choice of deputy president, just borrowing from the experience we've seen with this current administration, and in terms of today's debate, and this viewers' concerns that the deputy presidential candidates might contradict their bosses. I think this is coming from what we've seen happen.
And that's the maturity of Azimio, because, and he said it very well, our chair, Honorable Kara, was against BBI, and her principal, our captain, was for BBI. Now, what now brought them together? It's a negotiation that they were able to go beyond their personal interests. They were able to put Kenya first and realize, you know what, you do not agree with A, I don't agree with B, but that doesn't mean we cannot sit down and negotiate to work and make the lives of Kenyans better. So I believe that shows the maturity of the principles, maturity of the coalition, and it also demonstrates how, as we go forward, how the country shall be run. It will not be a one-man show. It will not be a government where one of the principals is not, doesn't want to talk to the other principal. Because from the beginning, it shows that they were not on the same side, but now they are, and they can work together. So to me, it tells a lot. It shows the maturity and the experience that they have in terms of dealing with national issues.
Let's take your tweets as we close. Let's take your tweets. And this is at Daybreak, hashtag is Daybreak at Citizen TV Kenya. We're taking your closing tweets. There we go. All right. Agumba, Steve, you're saying the only part that will depend on the debates are the undecided votes. Otherwise, sycophancy will take center stage, whether superb or poor performance in the debate. Kipchumba, I see you nodding in agreement. Let's take another. Levi Konas, the only thing that can change voters' mindsets in the debate tonight is the demeanor of the candidates, not policies. If any of them comes off as arrogant or haughty, it will make them lose traction way more than anything they can tell us. Irungu, you're more keen on the policies and you feel very strongly about policies taking center stage in today's conversations. But let's get one more tweet or two as we get the closing remarks from the panelists. In today's debate, moderators should focus on 3 issues: candidates' suitability to run affairs of the country and their emotional stability, their integrity credentials, their historical background, what have they done for the country. I'm urging candidates to attend debates, especially Kenya Kwanza candidates who initially hinted that they won't attend. It's only through debates that voters can know who is fit to lead the country. Political rallies are about making noise. And the idea of presidential debates between 2 competing political parties is good only if the intended audience is informed and can interrogate in detail what the politicians are saying, something Kenyans lack. Of course, this is not between 2 political parties. So today's DP candidates debate is important since it's going to shape the direction our country is going to take in the next 5 years. It should be about what hails Kenya and not self-centered. We've had enough of who is cleaner than the other in the campaigns. I want to talk on the issue of integrity. And this, again, just looking at the background of these personalities, 2 are very prominent in terms of how Kenyans understand them, what their vision is, especially Martha Karua coming out very strongly there, being a veteran politician. In terms of integrity, Irungu, we do know, and not specifically with regard to this debate, but we know that there are many personalities that are of dubious integrity, dubious character, that are going to be on the ballot. So when you look at integrity as regards the deputy presidential candidate and what these personalities represent, tying this to the fact that they're curtain raisers for the big debate, which is next week, the presidential debate, and we look at integrity issues and what each of these candidates speaks into in terms of integrity as we close.
So I think integrity is fundamental. I mean, I think the Kenyans know it. The reason why we are not progressing as a modern nation is because of the levels of corruption and the levels of impunity. So I don't think there is any skirting around this issue. There's no grey areas here. If candidates are coming to the table with tainted hands and a tainted career, Kenyans must be extremely careful not to hand them the keys to State House. But I think it's not just State House; it's all the county governments. I mean, I think it's all the places where you have public offices. And I think the thing that we need to also watch very carefully is not just the deputy presidential and the presidential, but the gubernatorial and also all the state agencies that we are starting to see appointments being made. And Jubilee, I think, in the last few days have actually made a number of appointments. But because everybody is running around looking at elections, nobody's looking very carefully at whether these are people that we can trust with, NEMA or the Water Regulatory Authority or any of these state agencies. We need to make sure that the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission list of 241 are kept very close to us as we go into the ballot. And there's a great tool, and let me just do this, and I've not been paid by African Uncensored to do this, but John Allen Namo and the team at African Uncensored have a very good app that they released, I think, 2 days ago, where you can put in your street, and it will immediately give you the list of all the candidates for every position at 6 levels. It makes things very easy for us to be able to do to map the candidates. So I think that's the first thing that we cannot compromise. You raised the point about the tension between presidents and deputy presidents. And, you can't legislate romance. Right? You can't legislate bromance. So for the male candidates in Kenya Kwanza or for the female male candidates in the other 3 parties, you can't legislate that as a relationship. But I think what we have to do is look at what is the nature, what have we been able to understand between the way that they relate with each other? Do they have strong policy differences historically? Do they have interpersonal dynamics that we're able to observe? But ultimately, in a presidential deputy presidential situation, the president has the supreme oversight and responsibility for leading a country, not the deputy president. This is not a shared ticket, and I think this is the lesson from Jubilee, is that it's not it's not a couple like in a marriage where the couple have equal rights. There is a superior.
Right, gentlemen, as we close, on integrity, the comment on integrity.
I think, Lillian, we cannot downplay the issue of integrity, because at the end of the day, we are giving you a 12+ trillion economy to run. You are running our 2 trillion taxes, which you collect. So at the end of the day, and that's why we gave Chapter 6 all the power. And that's why today, as we speak, Waititu and Mike Sonko are not on the ballot. So whereas somebody will say we are doing baby steps in terms of ensuring that we have leaders with integrity, I think we are in the right direction. The pace might be the issue, but we are moving there. And I will urge Amnesty International, all the NGOs of goodwill, to come on board. Let us make more noise. Let us also make sure that Kenyans understand the reason of voting bad leaders. Recently, it was unfortunate. I heard Matiang'i talking of electing wash characters. It was unfortunate coming from a Minister of Interior Security, because we ought to listen to him telling us we have arrested 50 wash people and we are prosecuting them. So at the end of the day, I would really like to understand the integrity journey also of these running mates. And then again, the other thing, when we talk about integrity, we need to move to the 5th Republic, because we are electing the 5th president, where fighting corruption, leadership and integrity will not be weaponized. We need to move to where institutions, the motions will be running on their own. And I think if we do that, everybody will have a sense that fighting corruption is not as a result of the person at the helm, but as a result of the processes we have. And on the issue of whether these candidates should tell us, actually there is a question that we need to know how each one of them has earned their money, because it is a discussion. We are giving you the key to our purse. You need to tell us how you have earned your money, what you have done with your life. If you cannot sustain yourself, tell us also, because it goes into how you run our affairs.
Kabale, as we close.
On the integrity issue, this is how I define it. Integrity is telling yourself the truth, and honesty is telling others the truth. So on integrity, my chair has already defined herself through experience, and she's known as an integrity champion. I'd like to see, with evidence and historical background, what our competitors' integrity credentials will be. And Kenyans need to look at it. I've seen the individual that has categorized 1, 2, 3. I liked it. I would now change it just to background to become the first on the list. So my take and my expectation for today's debate is the historical background, your integrity credentials, and what you're going to do for us, the personality, because you can't wish away personality. Personality is like your shadow, you know, and it comes also as credentials. So we need to feel and see that you're not an arrogant person, you're an approachable person, you're someone that we can entrust with our past, as my fellow members have said.
Gentlemen, we're out of time, but I thank you so much for your time this morning, joined by Oliver Kipchumba. He's an advocate of the High Court, also a political analyst. Also with us was Kabale Kile, Deputy Party Leader, Narc Kenya, and Irungu Houghton, Executive Director, Amnesty International. Gentlemen, many thanks for being with us on Daybreak. Stay with the channel. Much more coming your way. Willis Raburu is up next. We are going to see you very soon in subsequent bulletins. Have a good day.
Collect fare kwa boda au matatu ukitumia